sometimes a single dollar can buy you a world of trouble. But as we're about to see, sometimes it can also buy you a destiny you never knew you were searching for. When a burnt-out veterinary technician gambled her last dime on a derelict ranch, she thought she was just buying a plot of land. But what she found inside a collapsing barn would not only change her life forever, it would unravel a dark conspiracy and bring a powerful man to justice. This is an incredible story of how one woman's compassion and one horse's silent strength proved that the deepest bonds are forged in the hardest of times. Stay with us to see how it all unfolds. The glow of the laptop screen was the only light in Sarah Loxley's cramped Denver apartment, illuminating the tired lines around her eyes and the stacks of unpaid bills on her small kitchen table. For weeks, the same ghost had haunted her waking hours and her fitful sleep. The wheezing breath of a golden retriever named Gus, an animal she had fought for and lost, not to disease, but to the cold calculus of his owner's finances. "We just can't afford the surgery," they had said, their eyes avoiding hers. The memory was a raw, open wound, a symbol of the burnout that had hollowed out her passion and left only a lingering ache of helplessness. She had poured her soul into being a veti, memorizing the subtle signs of pain in creatures who couldn't speak, celebrating every small victory and mourning every loss as if it were her own. And all she had to show for it were scars on her heart and an eviction notice tucked under a magnet on her fridge. It was in this haze of quiet desperation, scrolling through endless pages of real estate she could never afford, that she saw it. Willow Creek Ranch, 150 acres, Gallatin County, Montana. Price, $1. The number was a joke, a typo, a glitch in the matrix. But as she read the fine print, the cruel reality settled in. It was a county tax lien auction. The dollar was just the opening bid. The real price was the crushing weight of $60,000 in back taxes and outstanding liens, a debt designed to scare away everyone but the most foolish or the most desperate. Sarah Loxley, it turned out, was both. With a click that felt both reckless and liberating, she drained her life savings, every last penny she had guarded so fiercely, and placed the winning bid. A confirmation email popped up, and just like that, she owned a piece of Montana. She was buying a fresh start, a plot of land where the ghosts of the city couldn't find her. The drive north was a blur of interstate asphalt and too much coffee. When her beat-up pickup truck finally rumbled down the dirt track that was supposed to be a driveway, the dream shattered against the harsh Montana landscape. The ranch wasn't just neglected. It was a skeleton, picked clean by time and indifference. The house sagged under the weight of a rotting roof, its windows like vacant eyes staring out at a world that had forgotten it. A porch swing hung from a single chain, swaying mournfully in the ceaseless wind. Barbed wire fences lay coiled in the tall bleached grass like dead snakes, and the silence was broken only by the moan of that wind through the skeletal cotton woods. A wave of nausea and regret washed over her. The crisp mountain air she'd imagined tasted only of dust and failure. This wasn't a fresh start. It was a graveyard for her last hope. Driven by a grim need to survey the full extent of her folly, she approached the barn. Its great doors hung crookedly on rusted hinges, and the whole structure leaned as if tired of standing up straight. The wood was silvered and splintered, and she could see daylight through the gaps in the walls. She slid through a narrow opening, her eyes struggling to adjust to the gloom. The air was thick, with the dust of ages and the sharp sour smell of decay and old manure. Light filtered in through missing slats in the walls, striping the darkness and illuminating dancing mows of dust, a silent swirling cosmos of neglect. And then she heard it. Not the scuttling of a rat or the flutter of a pigeon, but a low, ragged snort from the deepest shadows, followed by the heavy stamp of a single hoof. Her breath caught in her throat. She moved slowly, her worn boots silent on the packed earth floor, her senses on high alert. There, in a filthy stall at the far end of the barn, a shape resolved itself from the darkness. It was a horse, a magnificent copper-colored stallion, or what was left of one. His hip bones jutted out like cruel fins, his spine a rugged ridge beneath a coat so matted with burrs and filth it looked like petrified armor. His mane was a solid, tangled mass. His head hung low, but as she stepped closer, it lifted, and a pair of intelligent dark eyes, blazing with a mixture of terror and fierce pride, fixed on hers. In the corner of the stall sat a bucket of stagnant green water, a testament to a long and lonely suffering. This was Red. He was the sole living resident of her $1 mistake. And in that moment, all her regret, all her fear for her own future, was eclipsed by a fierce protective instinct. This wasn't just about a ranch anymore. It was about him. The first few days were a fragile truce, a silent negotiation across the barrier of fear and filth. Red was too weak to be truly dangerous, but the fire in his eyes warned her he was far from broken. He would flatten his ears and bare his yellowed teeth if she came too close. A proud king defending a ruined castle. So Sarah waited. She brought him fresh buckets of water that he would eye suspiciously for an hour before finally dipping his muzzle in and drinking with a desperate thirst that broke her heart. She left flakes of sweet-smelling alfalfa just outside his stall, retreating to the other side of the barn to watch as he eventually tentatively stretched his neck to eat. One afternoon, he took a step toward the hay, then flinched back as a loose board creaked overhead, his whole body trembling. She saw then the depth of the trauma, the expectation of pain that had become his only reality. Her vet tech instincts, the very skills that had burned her out, were now her only guide. She spoke to him in a low, soothing murmur, telling him about the city she'd left behind, about Gus, about the foolish hope that had brought her here. She didn't talk to him like an animal, but like a fellow survivor. "We're both a little broken, aren't we?" she whispered one evening as the setting sun cast long shadows through the barn. Slowly, painstakingly, the wall between them began to crumble. He stopped pinning his ears when she entered the barn. He began to nick her softly, a low rumble in his chest, when he heard her truck approaching. The day he finally allowed her to touch him, to lay a gentle hand on his bony shoulder without him flinching away, Sarah felt a profound sense of victory that no saved pet in the city had ever given her. The healing journey became a ritual of quiet devotion. Each day was a small miracle. She spent hours carefully working the burrs from his matted coat with her fingers, one painful knot at a time, revealing the stunning deep copper hide beneath. She treated the angry patches of rain rot that covered his back and cleansed a festering wound on his back leg, whispering apologies for the sting of the antiseptic. As she worked, she discovered things. He responded to the faintest shift in her weight, the slightest pressure of her hand, moving with an innate grace that hinted at years of sophisticated training. This was no ordinary ranch horse. He was intelligent, sensitive, and carried his trauma with a dignity that humbled her. In healing him, Sarah felt the broken pieces of her own spirit beginning to mend. The ranch was still a ruin. Her bank account was empty. But here, in this dusty barn with this forgotten horse, she felt a flicker of purpose she thought she'd lost forever. Her hard-won peace was shattered by the sound of an engine far too powerful for the rutted lane. A pristine, chrome-laden Ford F-350 pulled to a stop beside her rusting pickup, and a man in his 50s swung himself out of the driver's seat. He was tall and broad, dressed in a crisp shirt and a new Stetson that sat on his head like a crown. A large, ornate belt buckle glinted in the sun, a silver bull on a field of gold. "Orson Garraway," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, his smile wide, but utterly devoid of warmth. His eyes, a pale, washed-out blue, seemed to calculate her worth in an instant and find it wanting. Owned the Gaway Cattle Company next door. Heard someone was crazy enough to buy this old wreck. Sarah introduced herself, wiping her hands on her jeans. She felt small and grimy next to his polished presence. Jedediah Croft, the old fellow who owned this place, he lost his mind at the end. Garraway continued, his eyes scanning the dilapidated buildings with a dismissive sweep. "Let it all go to hell. Tell you what," he said, turning his cold gaze on her. You've got more trouble than you can handle here. I'll give you $5,000. Take the whole worthless mess off your hands. Call it a neighborly gesture. The offer was condescending, an insult disguised as charity. It wasn't an offer to help. It was an offer to erase her. Thank you, Mr. Garraway, but I'm not interested in selling, Sarah said, her voice firmer than she felt. The smile on Orson Garraway's face vanished, replaced by a flicker of something hard and dangerous. Suit yourself, he shrugged, but the friendliness was gone. This land, it has a way of breaking people who don't belong. He climbed back into his truck, leaving his words hanging in the air like a threat. The intimidation began 2 days later. She woke to find the single strand of fence she'd painstakingly repaired cut clean through. The handful of rescue cattle she'd bought on credit scattered across the neighboring pasture. It took her an entire day to round them up. A week after that, she came out of the barn to find 2 of her truck's tires slashed, the rubber gaping open like wounds. She was stranded, isolated, her meager funds bleeding away with every new setback. The high stakes were no longer abstract. They were a knot of fear tightening in her stomach. She was alone, outmatched, and Gaway's warning echoed in her mind. This land has a way of breaking people. But he hadn't counted on Red. The horse was her anchor, her reason to fight. Every day he grew stronger, his copper coat beginning to gleam, muscle slowly returning to his powerful frame. It was during one of their grooming sessions, while she was carefully combing through the last of the tangled knots in his thick mane, that her fingers brushed against something small and hard, buried deep beneath the skin at the base of his neck. Her heart quickened. She'd felt thousands of them in her career. It was a microchip. She raced to her truck and dug through a box of old supplies from her life in Denver. Her hands closed around a handheld scanner, a tool of her former trade. Her palms were sweating with Red standing perfectly still as if he understood. She held the scanner to his neck. It beeped and a long string of numbers glowed on the small screen. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number of a former colleague, a data clerk at the veterinary hospital. Jenna, it's Sarah. I need a massive favor. Can you run a chip number for me? She read the numbers into the phone. The silence on the other end stretched for an eternity before Jenna's astonished voice came back. Sarah, where did you get this horse? He was abandoned on my property. Why? Because this isn't just some horse named Red, Jenna said, her voice filled with awe. His registered name is Crimson Horizon. He's a champion-cutting horse sired by a Hall of Famer. His bloodline is legendary. The last registered owner was a Jedediah Croft Sarah. This horse is valued at over $150,000, Jenna continued. The file also notes a unique freeze brand on his left hip, a simple JC. The words hit Sarah with the force of a physical blow. She hung up the phone, her mind reeling. She gently ran her hand over Red's left hip, where the winter coat was still thick. A champion abandoned to starve in a filthy stall. It made no sense. Why would anyone leave an animal of this value, this caliber, to die a slow, agonizing death? This wasn't neglect. It was something else, something far darker. Driven by a new, urgent purpose, Sarah drove her repaired truck to the Gallatin County Courthouse. The tidy brick building felt a world away from the dust and decay of Willow Creek. She spent hours in a stuffy records room that smelled of old paper and lemon polish pouring over public records. The dry, legalistic language slowly painting a sinister picture. She found Jedediah Croft's death certificate. He had passed away 18 months prior after a long illness following a severe stroke. Then, she found the property records and the name that made the blood run cold in her veins. Orson Garraway. For the final year of Jedediah Kov's life, as the old man lay helpless and dying, Orson Garraway had held his complete power of attorney. The records were a sickening trail of breadcrumbs, leading to an inescapable conclusion. Garraway had systematically and callously executed a conspiracy of fraud. He had taken out massive loans against Willow Creek Ranch, funneling the money into his own accounts. He had sold off Jedediah's equipment, his cattle, everything of value. He had deliberately let the property taxes lapse, creating the very debt that had forced the ranch into a tax auction. The plan was as cruel as it was brilliant. Bankrupt the estate, let the county foreclose, and then swoop in to buy the land, and more importantly, its invaluable water rights for pennies on the dollar. He had assumed no one else would be foolish enough to bid. Her $1 gamble had thrown a wrench into his perfect, heartless machine. And Crimson Horizon, he was the last living link to Jedediah's legacy. A horse too famous on the show circuit to be sold without raising questions. So Gawain had simply locked him in the barn and walked away, expecting the Montana winter to erase the last piece of evidence. He didn't just leave a horse to die. He was trying to bury a man's entire life. The rage that filled Sarah was a pure cold fire. This wasn't just about her ranch or her money anymore. It was for Jedediah, a man she'd never met, and for the magnificent horse who had been betrayed alongside him. Orson Garraway had underestimated her. He thought she was just a city girl playing cowgirl. He was about to find out how wrong he was. Orson Garraway, furious that his campaign of intimidation had failed, decided to end things. One moonless night, the scent of gasoline cut through the crisp Montana air, sharp and sickening. Sarah was asleep in her small cot in the barn's tack room, a space she'd made her own to stay close to Red. It was the horse who saved her. A sudden violent snort, followed by the thunder of hooves kicking against a stall door, jolted her from her sleep. Then came a series of frantic, ear-splitting whinnies, a sound of pure terror that no animal should ever have to make. Sarah scrambled out of the cot, her heart pounding against her ribs. Through the cracks in the barn wall, she saw the demonic flicker of orange light. She threw open the tack room door and was met with a wall of heat and the terrifying sight of flames licking their way up the dry, ancient wood of the barn, consuming it with a hungry roar. Two shadowy figures were splashing more liquid from a can near the main entrance. Paddock seized her for a second. A paralyzing wave of terror, but then red screams from inside the barn galvanized her. She grabbed the heavy fire extinguisher from the wall and charged, a primal scream tearing from her own throat. The two men, startled, dropped the can and bolted, disappearing into the darkness. Sarah aimed the extinguisher at the base of the flames, the cold chemical foam hissing as it met the fire. She worked frantically, choking on the acrid smoke, her eyes streaming. Just as she thought the flames would overwhelm her, she saw the red and blue flash of approaching lights. Someone on the main road must have seen the fire and called it in. As the volunteer fire truck and Sheriff Brody's cruiser pulled up, Sarah saw the taillights of a pickup truck identical to Garraway's speeding away down a back road. The fire was out, but the declaration of war had been made. This was no longer a threat. It was attempted murder. That was the final straw. She knew exactly what she had to do. The next day was the annual Gallatin County Livestock Auction, the biggest social and economic event of the year. It was a day of celebration, of community, a day where ranchers showcased their best stock and reputations were solidified. And this year, the highlight of the event was the presentation of the Rancher of the Year award to none other than Orson Garraway. He had planned to celebrate his victory on the ashes of her home. Instead, she would deliver his judgment. She spent the rest of the night not in fear, but in focused preparation. By the soft glow of a lantern, she groomed Red until his copper coat shone like a newly minted penny. He stood with a preternatural calm, as if he understood the gravity of the moment. With a steady hand, she took a pair of electric clippers and carefully shaved a small patch of hair on his left hip. As the coarse winter fur fell away, two crisp clear letters emerged from the skin. J.C. Jedediah Croft's brand, her final piece of undeniable proof. The next day, she rode him. She didn't put him in a trailer. She rode Crimson Horizon straight through the main gates of the Gallatin County Fairgrounds. The sight of them sent a ripple through the bustling crowd. People stopped mid-con conversation, their heads turning to stare. They saw a stunning copper stallion moving with the fluid athletic grace of a true champion. His head held high, his powerful muscles rippling with every step. He was a vision of equine perfection, a ghost from a past everyone thought was buried. And on his back sat a determined young woman whose face was set like stone. She guided him directly toward the main auction arena where a temporary stage had been erected. Orson Garraway stood there bathed in the afternoon sun, a plaque in his hand and a self-satisfied smile on his face as he soaked in the applause. Sarah rode right up to the edge of the stage, the crowd parting before them like the Red Sea. She brought Red to a perfect collected halt and dismounted. The arena fell silent, the only sound, the soft jingle of the bit and the horse's quiet breath. "Congratulations on the award, Mr. Garraway." Sarah's voice rang out clear and steady, amplified by the sudden quiet. "I believe you know my horse." Orson Garraway's face went white. He stared at the magnificent animal before him, and for the first time, Sarah saw genuine fear in his eyes. The confident mask cracked. That's just some stray you found," he stammered, his voice losing its confident boom. "Is it?" Sarah replied coolly. She pulled the microchip scanner from her jacket pocket. "Sheriff Brody," she said, turning to the lawman who was watching from the side of the stage with a confused frown. "Would you do the honors?" Sheriff Brody, a man who operated on facts, not gossip, stepped forward and took the scanner. He ran it over the horse's neck. A beep and the long number flashed on the screen. Sarah then held up a sheath of papers. "This isn't a stray," she announced to the silent watching crowd. "This is Crimson Horizon, a registered champion quarter horse owned by the late Jedi Croft. A horse you, Mr. Garraway, declared missing and presumed dead right after you took his power of attorney." She didn't stop there. She held up the financial records she'd copied at the courthouse. "And this is how Mr. Garraway systematically defrayed a dying man, funneled money from his estate, and tried to steal his land right out from under him. He left this champion to starve to death, in a barn to cover his tracks. And when I wouldn't be scared off, he sent his men to burn my barn down last night with me and this horse inside it." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Murmurs turned into angry shouts. Orson sputtered denials, his face a mask of rage and panic, but the evidence was standing right in front of him, gleaming in the Montana sun. The living horse, the visible brand, the official paperwork. It was an irrefutable trifecta of his guilt. Sheriff Brody's face was grim. He had seen the evidence of the arson attempt himself. He walked onto the stage, took the plaque from Garraway's limp hand, and placed it on the podium. "Orson Garraway." The sheriff's voice boomed across the arena. "You're under arrest." As the handcuffs clicked shut around the rancher of the year's wrists, the crowd erupted, not in applause, but in a low, rumbling sound of communal judgment. Justice, it turned out, had arrived on horseback. Weeks later, the dust began to settle, both literally and figuratively. Orson Garraway's polished world had crumbled. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he was charged with a litany of crimes, felony fraud, embezzlement, animal cruelty, and attempted arson. His assets were frozen to pay restitution for the life he had systematically dismantled. The respected cattle baron became a cautionary tale, his name spoken in whispers, his legacy reduced to public disgrace, and a long prison sentence. For Sarah, the resolution was more profound than she could have imagined. The court, acting on the evidence she had uncovered, nullified all the fraudulent liens Orson had placed on Willow Creek Ranch. The staggering $60,000 debt, the weight that had threatened to crush her, vanished. It was charged to Garraway's frozen estate, where it belonged. Her title to the ranch was cleared. But the story had one final, unexpected twist. During the legal process, a search of Jedediah Croft's personal effects at his lawyer's office uncovered his true last will and testament, a document Orson had carefully hidden. It stated that upon his death, Jedediah wished to leave Willow Creek Ranch and his beloved horse, Crimson Horizon, to a charitable foundation dedicated to providing equine therapy for children with disabilities. The foundation's board of directors, stunned by the story, flew out to meet Sarah. They saw the transformed ranch, the magnificent horse, and the unbreakable bond between the two. They didn't see a squatter. They saw a guardian. They made her a proposal that left her speechless. The foundation would honor Jedediah's will and take official ownership of the ranch, but they wanted to hire her as the full-time salary director of the newly established Willow Creek Healing Ranch. As a signing bonus, they reimbursed her for every penny she had spent. Her initial $1 investment returned to her 1,000-fold in purpose. Her financial ruin was averted. Her reputation was cemented as a local hero, and she was handed the keys to the life she had only dared to dream of. 1 year later, Willow Creek Ranch was unrecognizable. The house was restored, its windows now bright and welcoming. The fences were strong and straight, enclosing lush green pastures. But the most beautiful change was the sound. The silence had been replaced by the laughter of children. Sarah stood by the arena fence, watching a small boy with cerebral palsy sit at top red. The great stallion, once a wild and terrified creature, stood as still as a statue, his head lowered patiently as the boy hesitantly reached out to stroke his copper neck. Sarah had found her home. She had rescued a horse, but in doing so, she had also rescued a legacy, uncovered a truth, and found her own healing. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes the most valuable things in life, courage, loyalty, and a second chance, cost almost nothing at all. This story shows us that one person armed with compassion can indeed change the world, one rescued soul at a time. If this powerful story moved you, subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another inspiring tale of courage, hope, and the extraordinary bonds between humans and animals. Share this video with a friend who would love this story. This story reminds us that a single act of kindness can echo far beyond what we imagine. One compassionate person, choosing to care, can truly make a difference, saving one life, one soul, one moment at a time. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to our channel, Stories for Horseback, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring story about courage, hope, and the incredible connection between humans and animals. And before you go, tell us in the comments which country you're watching from, and share this video with a friend who would appreciate a story like this.